Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 126. That is PEP or Planet Extra podcast, and it's an offshoot of Planet America on the ABC Australia, which you can see on Friday at 8 p.m. on ABC News Channel iView, on Facebook at ABC Planet America, and on YouTube at the ABC In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening, you can also see this podcast on Facebook and YouTube, where you will see Melina Wicks, writer, producer, researcher extraordinaire, and fellow laptop user on podcasts. Melina, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Do you have any disclaimers? I always love Dave's disclaimer.
No disclaimer. Well, no, because I'm not saying where I'm from. So
Fair enough. Okay. All right. Well, let me have a disclaimer for once. Planet America is back on Friday. It wasn't there last week. We had a little production break. And on Planet America, you're going to hear us talking about Israel. And right off the top of this pod, let me say we are not going to be talking about Israel today on this podcast. I want to be the only person who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, but will shut up for a little while. They're the only person in the world who will shut up when they don't know what they're talking about when it comes to this issue. How about you, Melina? Do you have any opinions you'd like to share about Israel?
I'm going to agree with your position.
Fair enough. Look, obviously, there is a way to handle that topic without acting like an instant Middle East expert, like the whole social media does. We could focus on the American political angle, for instance, to all this. That's what I'm going to be intending to do on Friday when I talk about this. But even for that, I'd like to take in more information, I feel. Doesn't hurt, just to take an extra couple of days. I'm finding the confidence with which other people are expressing opinions about this topic off-putting.
Yes.
So
I do not wish to join them.
Yes. Okay. All right. So let's move on. I'm not grateful for the Twitter pylons, but I'm grateful for something. Are you grateful for anything?
Yeah.
Yeah? What's that?
A sincere, non-political one, but it was my daughter and my husband's birthdays last week, and I'm very grateful for both of them.
Very nice.
I love them, and they make my life great. So I'm grateful for them.
It's lovely to see human emotion. We don't see that on this podcast very often. Thank you, Melina. What I'm grateful for is actually quite easy. It's the way that the Peppers, you guys, responded to my request for people to follow our What the FAQ Facebook page last week. It was lovely. That's the page called Chaz from What the FAQ, address Chaz WTFAQ, in case you don't know what I'm talking about. I should explain what that's about, though, because I didn't explain at all what it was about, really. Last week I just said, can you please join? I didn't really explain why. And some Peppers were confused in the comments. So I just thought, you guys are good to me. I'm going to be good to you. I'm actually going to give you, it's not really in my interest to do this, but I'm going to give you the actual story. As you guys know, when I passionately think something should happen at the ABC and I get denied by what I see as an unnecessary level of bureaucratic control, I just do it anyway. You know that's what I do because that's what this podcast is. I thought we should make a podcast to deal with all the topics and details we didn't fit into Planet America. I knew that American politics fans, like me, are really into the topic. And so I knew they'd want a very detailed service in order for us to do our jobs, more detailed than is on the TV show Planet America. I knew they'd want it long and they'd want it detailed and they'd want it super responsive. They wouldn't want fancy production. They just want the facts. I felt confident about that. The ABC disagreed with me. They had other ideas about how podcasts should be made. You can see what those ideas were by listening to literally any other ABC podcast. They all sound pretty similar. They told me no, and I did it anyway. And I called it Planet Extra Podcast because they owned the name Planet America, and they wouldn't claim I was violating their ownership of the name. So that's how this podcast started. And similarly, I think What the FAQ needs a Facebook page where we go through lots and lots of questions that you guys have asked that don't get on TV. Like for instance today, Kirsten answered the why is there less white dog poo than there used to be? Interesting question. She answered it. And also we need to give you guys way more info, I think, than we can fit in a 5-minute segment because sometimes people actually care about the answer. It's not just about having fun. And there's heaps of, you know this better than anyone, Melina. There's heaps of information that you go through and you fill it out when you're trying to answer a question. You go, well, that's just too detailed. That's why you have a Facebook page, so you can put that detail in if people actually care. Also, I feel like we need to give you access to us and sometimes our experts so you can argue with us when you disagree with us, because we will make mistakes because we are not experts. We are doing our best, but we will stuff up and then we can run corrections. And you can't do that if there isn't an access point. So for that reason, I think we require a social media presence. Now, you might have noticed the ABC tends to control their social media these days for all their shows. There's no individual pages anymore. There's a good reason for that. I'm not doubting their wisdom. A lot of people in the past have used their pages poorly and have gotten the ABC into trouble and they've screwed around. I get that. Like, our show is different. Our show is not like their shows. Our show is a lot more interactive than, say, Mother and Son, for instance. So we need a page and they don't. So I'm running the same play, essentially. I've started a Facebook page of my own. I'm not calling it What the FAQ because the ABC, once again, owns that name. I'm making it my own personal page and they can't stop that. It's just my page. But it's going to become the unofficial page for our show. I'm very open about that. And if we get renewed, we'll do all the things that I said before that I'd like to do on this page. So thank you very much, Peppers, for joining up. If we get renewed, hopefully it will be the place to be. If not, it'll disappear without trace. But I wanted to explain to you what was going on. Do you have anything to add to that, Melina?
No.
No? You've been sitting in the passenger seat the whole time while I've been living this. So yeah, you know it's all true.
I'm not going to talk about that.
Fair enough.
I'm not allowed.
Fair enough. As you can see, like I said at the beginning, not necessarily in my interest to explain all that.
Don't make me start giving disclaimers that I didn't need to give.
That's okay. Fair enough. Okay. All right. I don't go telling anyone I told you that, guys. All right. Now, Trump legal update. We got a question from Paul Young. I'd love to hear your view on discussion between Trump and Pratt on subs, etc. This is far worse than what Assange did. Assange showed Yanks killing wrong people. Trump revealed capability, he says. Now, I cite that because we can answer this question while actually giving the update about the Trump legal situation. I'll just tell you the story and then see if you have any thoughts, and then I'll give you my thoughts. Anthony Pratt is the executive chairman of Visy, which is the world's largest privately owned packaging and paper company. It's Australian. I'm not sure how much Visy is like either the American office or the English office. It doesn't seem to be quite the barrel of laughs that those shows are. But Anthony's zany red hair is a little bit more Dunder Mifflin, I feel, than Werner Hogg. But that's the American office.
Is it him? Because one of the news articles I read said Andrew Pratt, and I was like, is the news Anthony. Article wrong? And then I Googled, and there is also an Andrew Pratt.
There is an Andrew Pratt, but I'm pretty sure it's Anthony Pratt.
Okay.
At least the articles I saw said Anthony Pratt. That
I read one, I think it was CNN or something that was wrong.
Okay, well, there we go. I might stay. Look, you guys can correct us. Like I said, I'm all about corrections. If I'm wrong, just correct us in the comments. I'll mention it on Friday. I'm pretty sure it's Anthony. He's a member of Mar-a-Lago, and apparently he got chatting to Trump in April 2021 about America's submarines, and Trump told him that he thought Australia should buy some of those submarines, and we ended up doing that. As part of that chat, Trump apparently told Pratt the exact number of nuclear warheads that US submarines can carry and how closely they are able to get to Russian submarines that have been detected. Not sure why he did that, but apparently he did. That would obviously be highly classified information. This is where it becomes a little bit more Dunder Mifflin. Allow me to quote the article from I think it was CBS. No, ABC. It was ABC, I think. That's ABC America. One of Trump's former employees at Mar-a-Lago told investigators that within minutes of Pratt's meeting with Trump, he heard Pratt relaying to someone else some of what Trump had just said. And then, in emails and conversations after meeting with Trump, Pratt described Trump's remarks to at least 45 others, including 6 journalists, 11 of his company employees, 10 Australian officials, and 3 former Australian prime ministers. He has access to 3 former Australian prime ministers.
There's been a lot recently, to be fair.
That is true.
There's more than there used to be.
That's pretty much the whole population, really. Yeah. But just imagine how many people he must have told to know for a fact he at least told 45 people. Because I'm sure he told more than that. Anyway, the lesson from this incident is that you don't tell Anthony Pratt a secret. Whatever it is, that's the lesson. That's the takeaway. But is Trump in trouble, Melina?
Which is the funny thing about this to me was like about a week ago, the thought just popped into my head of what are the rules about verbally telling government secrets? Because obviously there's the documents case, but it just occurred to me, well, Trump's also probably telling people lots of things, lots of secrets. Why wouldn't he? He's obviously the kind of guy who would, if he's showing reporters and writers, hey, look at this classified document, as if he's not also saying, hey, here's an interesting fact I know.
Yes.
And presumably that would also be illegal. And has anyone looked into that? And then lo and behold, a week later, this story comes out. And so now I got my answer.
Yeah, there you go. You can't do it.
Can't do it. It's quite bad.
How do you feel about the comparison to Assange?
Well, I mean, without going into all the nuances of the Assange thing, Assange released a lot of secret documents.
He did.
It wasn't just the collateral murder videos. So,
but they're the ones he was charged with. He hasn't been charged with the other ones.
Yeah. I mean, I would say they're different, but I mean, lots of people are drawing comparisons in general with Trump's disregard for classified documents and Assange and Snowden. And I think it's fair at a minimum to ask the question of why, you know, those people, it's generally the people who would be most inclined to say those people should go to jail, who seem also very forgiving of Trump. And seems to be a little bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah. Look, I was going to say that I feel like it is just so different to Assange. It's probably not really a relevant comparison in that the Americans tried to charge Assange with the hacking of secrets. It wasn't just about leaking, it was about hacking. But the bulk of his so-called offences, you know, when I think about the Assange case, his so-called offences to me look a lot more like journalism than leaking. And Assange and other reporters obviously put consideration into what would be released and how it could be most responsibly done. In that case, in the collateral murder case, which is what he's been charged with, let's remember. I know people have all kinds of problems with other things that Assange has done, but that's not what he was charged with. Whereas Trump was obviously just shooting his mouth off for no reason whatsoever. So Trump does not compare favourably to Assange. I agree if we're going to do a comparison, but I just don't think it's really they're two different issues, really. Joe Hockey had a strange defence. Tell me what you think about this. Joe Hockey, he had a weird take. He's still around, Joe Hockey. He said, if that's all that was discussed, we already know all that. We have had Australians serving with Americans on US submarines for years. We share the same technology and the same weapons as the US Navy. What do you reckon?
I mean, what does he mean by we all knew about this?
Yeah. Go on. I think you're going where I'm going. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I didn't know about it.
Yeah,
I was in the military.
Yeah. Anthony Pratt's not a sailor. like if Anthony Pratt had just come off, you know, the deck of the sub, the nuclear sub, after working there for 6 months, and then Trump started talking to him about the classified information of nuclear subs, you go, yeah, no problems, because he knows this. But yeah, Anthony Pratt's not a sailor.
Yeah, nor are his business associates or the journalists.
Or the 3 former prime ministers.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a strange defence, I feel.
Yeah.
Is
Anthony Pratt in trouble, or is it okay if it's secondhand gossip?
I think, well...
State secrets.
Yeah. I that's a good question. I don't know. Like, I mean, normally when you're talking about these things, it's about people leaking to journalists, and then journalists are doing their job. They've got a First Amendment right to publish this stuff and so forth. But when it's just gossip...
Because if Trump gave me a classified document as a present, souvenir from my visit to Mar-a-Lago, and I then pass it on to someone else, I would be disseminating classified material.
Yeah.
So I would still be committing that crime as well myself. But when it's information that you've been told, that's sort of, you could argue as gossip or innuendo. Yeah.
But also, where did Anthony Pratt tell these people this? He's Australian. I know he's a member of Mar-a-Lago. So did he tell these people it's in America? If an Australian is telling Australians this in Australia, it's got nothing to do with the American law. So I don't know. That's the answer to that question. But what I would say is that, but one thing we can be sure of is that if it was told to someone in the Navy, like Joe Hockey said, then that's fine. As it turned out, Pratt told pretty much everyone in Australia, apart from the Australian Navy, from the sounds of things. But I would say that what Trump did is definitely illegal if he did actually disclose that information. But did he? We're just assuming that what he said was right. Now, I know that the investigators asked Pratt to stop sharing the information with others, and that suggests it might be potentially classified, but maybe not. I mean, Jack Smith is not shy of prosecuting Trump. He seems to have done it a lot. And Jack Smith has had this information for quite some time, and he hasn't prosecuted Trump.
Although, to be fair, he has been sort of selective in terms of what he's chosen to charge Trump with. He charged Trump with mishandling the documents that he refused to give back, but not the ones which he should not have had, but did give back, because he's clearly running a strategy of trying to press charges that have the best chances of sticking. Yeah. And it would be much harder to prove that he had verbally transmitted classified information. So he may well be aware of it and may well consider it illegal, but have left it off the table like those other things.
That may well be the case, although I would suggest if Anthony Pratt has told people the precise details of nuclear subs and he said, I got this from Trump, then it'd be pretty hard to construct an alternative hypothesis on how he got that information.
Yes.
Yes. But I mean, you're right. But, like for some reason, you might think that it might not stick. The charge might not stick. That is true. But I would also say there's a very real chance, since nothing Trump says is accurate, that this would not be the exception. That even if he's heard this information before, he might not have remembered it perfectly and might have told Anthony Pratt something that's not 100% true.
Yeah, he probably exaggerated the amount of warheads by tenfold. Yes. We know he likes to overestimate the size of things.
He does. The best warheads you've ever seen. And the warheads came up to me with tears in their eyes and they said, "Sir."
Beautiful warheads.
Yes. Yeah. So that's, I mean, my guess is probably that's the case, that he didn't give him the exactly accurate information. And so
30,000 square feet of warheads.
Exactly. There you go. She landed it. And obviously if he gave him the wrong information, that's not illegal at all. What I would suggest is that if Smith wants to use it, he probably is going to use it as evidence of Trump's state of mind, that he is very loose with what he believes to be classified information. Then it is useful. It doesn't matter if he told them the exact number or what. Like Pratt's a good witness, a solid witness to show that Trump is just very loose with classified information. And I suspect that's how it may be used, if at all. Otherwise, just good gossip. I suppose my only takeaway, my only other question is, why was this leaked? I mean, I know Pratt has a lot to say, but if it was leaked by Pratt, we would have heard it 2 years ago. Like, that's not from him, I don't think. Now, I don't know why.
Is he on the list of witnesses?
He was, but once again, how did the actual story come out? He was a list of potential witnesses, yes. Did Trump leak it? I don't see why he would. So then you go, okay, well, there's only one other party. That's Jack Smith's team. Why would they have leaked it? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question, but just that if you want to ponder something, ponder that. Wait, how did this come out and why? It's because it's a bit weird. It's just come out now. I mean, maybe a journalist followed up. Maybe they saw Anthony Pratt's name on the witness list and they asked him, why are you on the potential witness list? And Anthony Pratt wouldn't have held back. 45 became 46.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. Let's get into a completely other area, though. Let's get into the new content. RFK. Now, Robert Kennedy this news hasn't broken yet. This news is potentially breaking tomorrow, that he's about to announce running as independent. I've got a lot of polling talk about him, but I think you've got some talk about... why don't you just take us through who RFK is and anything you've got to say about this?
Yeah, we should, before we talk about his prospects in the election, just explain who he is for anyone who's not well acquainted. He is a longtime Democrat, obviously son of Robert Kennedy Sr. and nephew of JFK, and is an environmental lawyer and had been running against Biden, polling sort of high watermark of around 20%, now sliding backwards and set to run as an independent. Beloved by the alt-right these days. He would say he's running as a free speech guy, You're a free speech guy, big RFK fan.
Yeah, I'm a great fan of RFK.
He seems mostly interested in freedom of speech for people who want to talk about vaccines on Instagram. Factcheck.org did a 3-part special on him, I learned last night. Yeah. He would say he's not anti-vaccine. This does seem to be his primary thing that he wants to talk about. He's not anti-vaccine. He just really wants people to know many things about them. Specifically, in his words, vaccines aren't tested for safety. They cause autism. Babies are being injected with influenza vaccines with ethyl mercury levels 100 times greater than the amount considered to be safe. Hep B vaccines have fewer than 5 days of safety testing, so if a child has a seizure or dies on the 6th day, it's never seen. African children inoculated with the DTP vaccine had 10 times greater mortality than their unvaccinated peers. The HPV vaccine causes infertility and slurred speech. And of childhood vaccines in general, direct quote from him, they get the shot. That night they have a fever of 103 degrees. They go to sleep and 3 months later, their brain is gone. This is a Holocaust, what this is doing to our country.
That's worrying if true, Melina.
He uses Holocaust analogies a lot. It's also worth pointing out. And yeah, if any of that were true, I would be an anti-vaxxer. It's weird to not be an anti-vaxxer if you believe those things to be true. But of course, it's all demonstrably bullshit. So yes.
Before you go on with his other thoughts, I can just say that on this question, the vaccine question, I was dreading when I came back to catch up on what I'd missed in June this year. And he had announced that he was running the Democratic primary. I was dreading that he would become a big enough story that I would have to fact check some of his stuff. Because I don't know how much you actually, if you just read up on him or if you actually tried to fact check some of his theories, but he's hard to fact check. Like I had a bit of a look. Like he's not an idiot. He's not like he's definitely not a moron. Like there are some morons who just say stuff like Marjorie Taylor Greene type stuff. When she says it, it takes you 1 second to prove it's not true. But he's not like that. Like he cites studies, he cites papers, and for you to, and if you look at the abstract, you go, well, that checks out what he just said. But if you actually go into the paper and you look at the fine print and you try and understand what okay, he's misunderstood this either intentionally or just accidentally because he doesn't get this aspect.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if he's malign or if he's just not very good at his job or what it is, but he just keeps on screwing up his understanding of these things. But it takes you to understand the paper better than him to fact check him. And this is stuff that you didn't know about 5 minutes ago. And so it takes you literally for each one, it takes you 2-3 hours for each one of research to work out what the hell is going on. So he's a nightmare to fact check, but it also makes him a particularly effective misinformer because you can't fact check. Like, and when people go, doctors have, like the classic journalist fact check where they go, the AMA rebuts that, or whatever, has debunked that allegation, and that's their fact check. You go, well, that's not good enough because people at home go, well, hang on, just look at the abstract. That makes sense, you know. So for me, he's tough to, he's concerning for that reason.
Well, and he has a particular technique that like I've seen him use in lots of interviews. But I mean, he's very into this issue. He's written a book about it that has like tens of thousands of footnotes in it, and this has been his main cause for over a decade. And when he does interviews, he'll rattle off this fire hose of information. It's just, then there's this fact and this fact and this fact and this fact and this issue and this study and these people said this and this is what happened when they looked at this. And so you get this like paragraphs worth of information. And the guys on the other end and the kind of interviews he does is with all these sort of people, I mean, not just all right, but, you know, it is like Joe Rogan, but also Glenn Greenwald, Bill Maher, and they all kind of go like, yeah, like that's a good point. These are valid questions. Or, you know, they don't end up engaging on the substance of any individual thing. And so you're left, if you're not critically looking at all these things, as you say, with this perception of this guy knows what he's talking about. This guy's done a lot of research. This guy's rattling off a lot of facts. Like he is able to talk more about vaccines off the top of his head than I am. It's just everything he's saying is false. But he's not saying, you know, vaccines came from aliens to kill us. He's saying this pseudoscientific stuff that sounds convincing if you're remotely receptive to it. And all these people who are ostensibly smart sit there being like, he's a smart guy. So it is quite dangerous.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's an example of a time when he's had a demonstrably dangerous effect in the world, which was he played a part in what ended up being a very deadly measles outbreak in American Samoa. So in 2018, there was a tragic accident where 2 infants died when nurses accidentally prepared the MMR vaccine with expired muscle relaxant instead of water. So there was a mix-up in the local use of the vaccine. Yeah. 2 kids died. There was an announced temporary suspension by the government of the vaccine program. And in that time, Kennedy and other activists flooded the scene with all of this information about vaccines. He went to Samoa to be part of this organized attempt to spread misinformation. The vaccination rates plummeted in that time. And then a year later, a tourist with measles came to the island. 5,700 people got sick and 83 people died, mostly young children. And that was a direct reaction, obviously not just to him. Also, this kid's dying in the accident would have played on people's minds, and the temporary suspension would have played on people's minds. And he wasn't the only person involved, but he was actively involved in discouraging the take-up of this vaccine in that period of time. And all these people died as a result. So it is dangerous stuff to be putting that information out there. And he's getting a lot of platforms as a result of this. And I've seen some interviews where he gets pushed back on a bit, but others where people just let him run. And again, if you're not across this stuff, it sounds compelling or like there's some merit, and it is quite hard to find the information that seriously engages in it and debunks it.
Totally. And I was going to say that that even when he gets challenged, not every time, but even when he gets challenged, a lot of the time the challenges are those kinds of surface level challenges I described before. The AMA has debunked that accusation.
Yeah, and he just says they're all corrupt.
Yeah, and then he has a follow up, like you say, he goes, but what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? Fact. Well, seemingly,
yes.
Fact. And it's very impressive if you have no idea what you're on about.
He's a lawyer, so he knows how to talk.
Yeah, he does. He does. It's just he's a completely different cat to a lot of the other misinformers out there. So anyway, so I'm hoping that we'll see how he polls. If he's polling at 5-10%, I won't bother. But if he does end up being 20% or 15%, I'm gonna have to fact check that prick, and it's gonna take so much time. But anyway, go on.
And just it's worth pointing out that this isn't unfairly taking something that is a view he's expressed once or twice in the past, but he's not bringing into the political sphere and making it an issue to discredit him politically. This is a big part of his campaign. When he is doing press now, in the past few months to promote his presidential campaign, it's under the guise of freedom of speech. Tech companies, trying to, and government trying to silence him, but the reason that he's animated about the idea of freedom of speech is specifically in relation to his silencing on these issues of vaccines. And he doesn't seem very interested in other examples of freedom of speech being limited. People have pointed out he has nothing to say about, for example, books being banned in libraries across the country. He's, very specifically animated about this. And he talks at length about the vaccine issues in interviews while promoting his presidential campaign. Just some other random views he's espoused recently while we're at it, non-vaccine related. He says the rise in school shootings can be attributed to certain antidepressants. Interesting theory. Yeah. Chemicals in the water might be making people identify as transgender. Wi-Fi radiation and 5G causes cancer. Yeah, classic.
I was going to say the water one. That's the classic Alex
Jones.
Yeah, the
frogs turning people gay.
Yeah.
that one.
That one. Yeah.
He says the 2004 presidential election was stolen. 2004.
2004. Okay. Is he the was it the things they were saying back then, the things about the Ohio voting machines, or was it?
Yeah, imagine. And to be honest, I haven't done a deep dive on that.
No, that's okay.
And he's also questioned if HIV really causes AIDS, which we know it does.
Yeah.
The most shocking thing I learned about RFK during this process is that he's married to Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm.
I couldn't believe that. I learned that this year as well.
People out there who share our Venn diagram of interests of US politics and TV comedy will also be interested to learn that, I suspect.
It's amazing. But you told me an even more amazing fact.
They were introduced by Larry David.
Larry David! Imagine how Larry David feels now.
Little bit of context, Larry David's ex-wife is an environmental activist, and RFK's career was in environmental activism. So he was an environmental lawyer who fought against companies, and that's obviously partly informed his conspiratorial thinking, seeing all these big companies engaging in pollution and, making rivers toxic because it's easier to pay the fine than it is to do the right thing, all these kinds of things. But they met at an environmental activist event and Larry introduced them, and I'm not sure how he feels about it now, but things have taken a turn.
Yeah, I can't imagine he'd love it. I mean, number one, like he's such a cynical fellow, and number two, he's Larry David, and he's also a hardcore Dem as well. So
and RFK, as I say, does like to compare vaccines to the Holocaust quite a lot, and also has a theory about COVID being engineered to not infect Jews, which is odd.
Yeah. Look, I mean,
he tried to walk it back, but
no, yeah, I know. I just wondering if I should go into detail on that one, because it's like he definitely. What he said at the time, if you actually play the actual thing, you can see totally where it came from, like the accusation. But then he was saying, I didn't mean it like that. And anyway, I don't know. I don't want to get into the weeds with RFK. You go on. That's fine.
No, that's enough.
Okay. All right. Okay. Where I'm going to jump on board this train is the question, which I think is actually the relevant one, because RFK is not going to be president. Sorry, RFK fans, if you're watching, he ain't going to be president. The question is he going to be a spoiler or is he going to be irrelevant? That is the question. Now, the field is ripe for another option in the elections. Like, Biden and Trump are definitely going to be the two least popular major contenders ever, assuming that they both become the nominees. There was a Gallup poll recently. 63% of American adults agree that the Republicans and Democrats do such a poor job of representing American people that a third major party is needed. I know he's not a major party. There's still some question whether he will be run for Libertarians or not. We'll find out. By the time you're listening to this, you'll know the answer to that, whether he's running as a Libertarian or as an independent. That number, 63%, was up from 56% last year. And it's the highest since Gallup first asked the question in 2003. 75% of independents agreed with that. The thing I found most interesting was that 58% of Republicans agreed with that. That the Republicans and Democrats do such a poor job of representing the American people that a third major party is needed. And 46% of Democrats agreed with that. The only time the Republicans have been higher ever was January 21, just after January 6. At that point in time, for 1 month, they had 63% said Republicans and Democrats do such a poor job in their third party. And then they fell back in line to a certain extent. So the field is ripe for a third option. No, so my first question is he going to get any votes at all? Because he can't be a spoiler if he's not getting votes. There's a lot of people who are freaking out about Ross Perot, who got 18.9% of the vote in 1992. And he ran again in 96 and still got plenty of votes, not quite 18.9%. I don't remember the number. It was like 9 or 10%, I think, in 96. And then Jill Stein, the people will still remember, obviously, from 2016. She only got 1% of the vote. Like, honestly, she did not affect the outcome of 2016. But as much as people like to pretend she did, she didn't when you look at the numbers closely. But it doesn't take much to have an influence.
Well, there was also Gary Johnson in 2016.
There was. That is true.
Who I think got 3 or 4%.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But the people who are freaking out about this are lefties. So that's why they're worried about Jill Stein, not Gary Johnson.
Well, but the argument is that some never Trump Republicans parked their vote with the Libertarians in 2016 rather than going to Biden, to Hillary. And if they'd gone to Hillary, then...
That's fair. Yeah. But I mean, Ralph Nader famously only got 2.7% of the vote, 1.6% in Florida, and he definitely cost Al Gore the election. So that is so it doesn't take much. He could definitely get 1.6%. Okay, so, but we should say whatever his vote. Well, sorry, go jump in.
Well, I was going to say, and it's also like, even Jill Stein's, 1%, obviously that doesn't make a difference nationally, but, when you're looking at the states where the margins are so fine, where the elections are decided, totally. I mean, in the case of 2016, Michigan, Wisconsin, what's the other one? Pennsylvania. Yeah. Those three. Yeah. I mean, I know it's sort of, debatable because you're passing like what would people have done otherwise, but in those states, people do argue that the amount, if everyone who voted for Jill Stein voted Democrat instead, then Hillary probably would have got over the line. And similarly in this instance, 1% probably not going to be the difference maker nationally, but it could be the difference in some specific states when the margins are so small. It can be tens of thousands of votes.
Totally. When you got a very small margin, but I mean, like just. We don't get bogged down in Jill Stein, but like people have definitely crunched numbers on Jill Stein. Like there were states where her vote was greater than the margin, but the people who voted for her were not going to exclusively vote for Hillary.
Yeah,
Clinton.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, but yes. But anyway, but also the other thing is that the people in these swing states aren't dumb. They know they're in swing states, and what you'll find is third parties get lower results in swing states for that reason, because they know that their vote is critical.
Yes.
And so they don't piss it away to a third party, right? Also, whatever his vote is, like people are going to look at his polling now and go, oh my God, 15% or whatever. Like, forget that. Like, his vote is going to get smaller and smaller as time goes on. Like, look at Gary Johnson as an example of 2016, okay? He was in July 2016 polling at 10%. That was his average in July 2016. It fell to 5% in the final averages. He actually got 3.3% of the vote. Like the same thing's going to happen here. He's going to, whatever he's at now, it's going to go down. But if he's in the wrong state and sure, potentially if it's 2% or 3%, that could make the difference, yeah? Okay, what does the polling say? Let's talk about the polling. His favourables look really bad for Republicans at first sight. Quinnipiac in July, his favourables were 48% favourable, 18% unfavourable amongst Republicans. So that's plus 30. 14% favourable, 57% unfavourable amongst Democrats, minus 43, okay? Nate Silver noted that out of 8 polls in July, the average net favourability for RFK amongst Democrats was minus 5, and amongst Republicans was plus 28. That's July. Things might have changed since then, and I'm sure Trump's going to go to work on him soon as well. So that might change that. Early polling, however, not favourability polling, but head-to-head polling, seems bad for Dems. Echelon polled Trump versus Biden head-to-head, and then Trump versus Biden versus RFK. RFK, being added in, turned a 46 to 43 point Trump lead, that's a 3-point lead, to a 40 to 36 to 14 lead. So they turned a 3-point lead, Trump lead, to a 4-point Trump lead. It's only 1 point, but still, it's moving in Trump's direction. In particular, though, if you look in the crosstabs, 11 points came from GOP leaners to RFK, and 17 points came from Dem leaners to RFK. He did change the true independent vote from 34 to 24, Trump to Biden. So Trump was leading the true independent vote by 10 points. To 21, 24, 18. So Biden was leading by 3 points when you added RFK, but there's only 8% of them. So overall, it was an advantage to Trump when you added RFK. That's just one poll. There hasn't been much of this polling yet. I'm sure there'll be a lot in the next few weeks. Now, if that would make sense if that was the case, because obviously Republicans who like Trump are very committed to Trump. Like, he has a high floor and a low ceiling. Whereas Dems are not so committed to Biden. And they just hate Trump. That's why they vote for Biden. So if they have another option, they might vote for that other option. Also, Dems might not know all of RFK's issues yet. They are definitely going to know them before long. Okay, let's look at his supporters. This is another issue for Dems. RFK has been pushed by Steve Bannon, by Alex Jones, and by Roger Stone. That's not a good triplet. Now, admittedly, the three of them pushed him to run the Democrat primary. They might have different views now he's an independent, but we'll see about that. His super PAC raised $9.7 million through the end of June. more than half of that came from one person, Timothy Mellon, who had previously given $20 million to a Trump super PAC. Once again, we don't know what Timothy Mellon will do when he's an independent. But then it gets more complicated because let's look at the July New York Times Siena poll where his favourables, RFK's, were 28-48 amongst Dems, so minus 20, but 22-57 amongst Biden 2020 voters, who are not the same as Democrats. There's a 6-point swing there, away, in favourables I'm talking about, away from Democrats to Biden 2020 voters. So away from Biden 2020 voters to Democrats, as in he's more popular amongst Democrats than Biden 2020 voters. What does that tell me? That tells me that Democrats who don't like Biden are more likely to support him, as in people who wouldn't vote for Biden anyway. They're Trump voters, even though they're registered as Democrats. That's not a big surprise, but that's something you should consider. So he could provide an off-ramp, essentially, for Democrats who don't like Biden, which would be terrible for Trump, because it means he's taking votes away from Trump, right? Now, Kennedy himself, if you ask him, says he's going to take votes from Trump.
And the other thing is that I take more votes from President Trump than I do from President Biden.
Right, so why would that help them?
Yeah, it's not helping them.
Yeah.
If you can't trust RFK, who can you trust, Melina? Trump's also acting like RFK is a threat to him. There's an article in Semaphore last week about Trump internal polling saying that RFK drew more votes from Trump than Cornel West drew from Biden. There's a bit of news on Cornel West, but I'm not going to save that for the next podcast. And so their campaign was going to release an onslaught of opposition research. Quote, we're going to be dropping napalm after napalm on his head, reminding the public of his very liberal views dating back to 2012. Another Trump world person told Semaphore. We have a lot of stuff on him. Let's see if they do that. If they do, that's a sign that that's true. That he does hurt Trump more than Biden. His issues certainly point to Trump. You look at what he's been talking about. He's, as you say, skeptical of vaccines. He's been flirting with the national abortion ban after 15 weeks. He's against funding Ukraine. He doesn't think it's realistic to reduce gun violence. He's, quote, not going to take people's guns away. None of that's very Dem-friendly. The other thought is that maybe he'll affect no one. Like RFK's favourability amongst those who didn't vote in 2020, 44-16. They love him. So maybe he just pull voters from the sidelines. People who are too disaffected to vote for either. We just don't know. What do you think?
To me, I feel like he is a wild card in the sense that I don't think he's going to... I think Trump voters are very committed to Trump. I think anyone who's enthusiastically voting for Trump now is not going to switch their vote to RFK. And I don't think that more traditionally conservative Republicans who are uneasy with Trump are going to switch their vote to RFK because he doesn't make sense as a, it's not like Nikki Haley running as an independent. He doesn't make any more sense to them than Trump would. And on the Biden side, I think most Democrats are, if not enthusiastic about Biden, enthusiastic enough in their hatred of Trump and aware enough of what happened in 2016 or the perception of what happened in 2016 that they are going to vote for Biden because they're not going to want to risk Trump winning by default. But having said that, there'll be some proportion of people who are anti-vaccine, like passionately so, who will probably want to vote for Kennedy, who are not necessarily I don't know what the numbers are. It used to be. Well, some of these people come from the left and some come from the right with different kinds of mindsets. So I wouldn't say that that's an obvious draw from one or the other. There are some people who just want to park a protest vote somewhere. To me, I feel like the next election is going to be exactly like the previous two, which is really close, like coming down to a few states with really fine margins. The popular vote may be far apart, may not, but I think the actual election will be decided in a handful of states with very narrow margins. And in that context, it doesn't take a lot of votes to affect the outcome. So I don't think he's going to en masse be pulling voters away who would otherwise happily vote for Trump or Biden, or not even happily, but, definitely. But it's one of those things where I would be surprised if there is when you say, like, we'll know what Trump thinks if they start dumping Oppo research, we'll know what they think, but we won't know necessarily that they're right.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things where we won't really know until after, whether he's had an impact or not. I would be surprised if he was getting like 15, 20% of the actual vote. I would be surprised if it's high, because I don't feel like he has a natural constituency anywhere in terms of the views that he's putting forward. I don't think that there is a big crowd for that. And yeah, he's sort of, I think the enthusiasm he's gotten on the right is more about mischief making in the context of a Democratic primary than an intention to actually vote for him. But yeah, I mean, the other thing I would just say about RFK is like funny to me to have the self-awareness to say, this Democratic bid for the presidency is going nowhere, I'm going to quit. And then the lack of self-awareness to say, I'm going to run for president as an independent instead. I don't know what his intention is. I find that the most mysterious part. Yeah,
that's a good question. I have no idea what he's thinking either. Like, surely he can't think he's going to win. And look, and even if he does, even if right now he thinks he's going to win, if when he starts polling 10% or less, like, why wouldn't he then just drop out? I don't know. I don't understand these people ever. There's a whole bunch of these people. I don't understand them. Look, I'll tell you why I think he's a risk. I think he's as you said earlier, just at the wrong state, the wrong time, the wrong amount, you never know. There's always uninformed voters. While it seems to me incredible that Americans can know so little about their own system, there are always voters like that. And I think the reason why he's a risk is because think of the campaign Biden's going to run. I know he's run some ads recently about Bidenomics. He ain't running on Bidenomics. He's running against Trump. Like, it's going to be Trump is going to destroy our democracy. This could be our last election. It's going to be that kind of stuff. It's going to be, this person is a clear and present danger to the country, and so you need to stick with me, even though I'm 150 years old and no one likes me. Like, that's going to be the campaign. It's not going to be positive about Biden. It's going to be negative about Trump. That kind of campaign, when you have a third party, makes the third party more attractive. When the person isn't actually putting forth positives, they're just putting forth negatives at the other side, then, like, some people could park themselves at the third, especially when, look, let's be honest about this. He seems like a thoroughly decent guy. When you watch him in an interview, he sits there, he's very polite, he waits, he doesn't interrupt people. He takes a lot of crap. He does a lot of interviews where people are being aggressive against him, and he's lovely. Like, he deals with it perfectly well. He's very good at that kind of stuff. And I could totally see in a really negative environment where the two sides are at each other, Trump's being his arsehole self, Biden's being, this is the end of the world, and RFK's just sitting there just being polite. Some people are going, you know what, screw these guys. Let's just go with a nice guy. Like the guy who's the public servant.
Yeah, and don't underestimate the power of the branding of the Kennedy name. Just, I could see people who are maybe not delving into his positions thinking, oh, Kennedy, remember when Democrats were not far left, they were centrist, and you know, that kind of Midwest Union guy who has always voted Democrat and then likes Trump and then is maybe like a Kennedy. I'll vote for a Kennedy. You could see people feeling like it's safe to park their vote with a name like that.
Yeah.
I always find it a little bit baffling that low information voter that votes. It's obviously just very different to Australia where we have compulsory voting. So obviously baked into the system is that we force people to vote even if they're not interested and don't care and don't pay attention. And that's an important part of our electoral system. Yeah. Whereas in America, you don't have to. So it's weird to me to not pay attention but still be like, I'm still going to vote. I don't know who for, that guy. But
by the way, just as a little aside, a bit of a tangent treehouse, I really even though I as a libertarian, I don't like forcing people to do anything, especially things like voting and stuff like that. I like the idea if you don't want to vote, and I'm a hypocrite because I don't vote. So I'm always working on election day for a start, but I just don't bother. I don't think you should force people to vote if they don't want to vote. But I acknowledge that is one of the strengths of our system. And I don't mean the compulsory voting element of it. I mean the fact that a whole bunch of people who have no information and don't care get to vote. You would think that's a weakness. I think that's a strength. And the reason why is because it really discourages people from running negative, shitty campaigns. Because if all you see of one side is just some nasty, horrible ad, and you're a low information voter, you just see that, you go, well, screw these guys, I'm voting for the other one. And so it really encourages good behaviour from parties. Now, I know people hear that and go, huh, good behaviour? I promise you, it could be so much worse than. Just look at America.
Yeah.
It could be so much worse than it is in Australia, and that's the reason why. It's not like we're just great blokes. It's because it's not in their interest to be negative and nasty.
Yeah, well, and the concept of appealing to your base, which is also, I mean, it's voluntary voting and also having a primary system the way they do in the States. It encourages people to pander to their base and it's go for turnout rather than persuasion or going for the middle ground. And yeah, I think that it is a moderating force in Australia. And it is, I'm in a similar boat to you where if we didn't have compulsory voting and someone proposed it, I'd be kind of uneasy.
Yeah.
I would find it like hard to justify, but having it, I wouldn't want to lose it.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else to say about RFK? No. Okay. Let's go into poll Pourri. I've got a couple of random polls before we get into another interesting area. The Biden impeachment inquiry. A really interesting poll from Monmouth. 34% said that Biden should be impeached. 16% said he may have violated his office but should not be impeached. 43% said Biden has not violated his oath of office in his actions as president so far. So what that really means is 34-59 for impeachment. 34% for, 59% against for impeachment at this point in time. Now, I know it's early days. They haven't even begun. But at this stage of the first impeachment inquiry, there was plus 10 for impeachment at this point in time. Like when it was minus 10 just before they announced the impeachment inquiry in the first impeachment. And then within like a week, there was like a 20-point swing. And it was plus 10 for impeachment. And then for the rest of that period, for the next 4 months or whatever, it just gradually dropped to be almost basically 50-50 at the end. So if that is anything to go by, that the enthusiasm will wane as time goes on, then they're starting really badly. They're starting 25 points down there. Is that right? 50, 59? Yeah, starting 25 points down. Worse still for them. This is the same poll, Monmouth. Just 15% of the electorate has a lot of trust in the House to conduct a fair investigation. 33% has a little trust, just a little trust. 50% has no trust in the House at all to conduct a fair investigation. The 50%, that sounds reasonable. That's Democrats. Okay, that sure, half of them. I'm more interested in the 15% that have a lot of trust. That means lots of Republicans don't have a lot of trust in the Republicans to hold a fair inquiry. Back in November 2021, when the House formed the January 6th committee, if you recall, 26% had a lot of trust for them in that investigation. 31% had a little trust, and 41% had no trust. What's the difference? The difference is the partisans. Like Republican, like only the 58% of Democrats had a lot of trust in the January 6th committee. Only 29% of Republicans have a lot of trust in this impeachment inquiry, which surprised me.
Well, I suppose they literally can't do it at the moment because they don't have a speaker.
No, I know. This poll was before the speaker.
But I mean, it might be a reflection of the discomfort among some of the Republican base with the way that they're operating in the House at the moment, even in the lead up.
Yeah, it might be, but still 29% is very low. Only 27% of people, not Republicans, people, said that Hunter's legal woes make them less likely to vote for Joe Biden. Obviously, almost all of them are Republicans.
Yeah.
Voters who currently support Biden, who say this issue may affect their support, this just may affect their support, okay? 2% of the total electorate. Another 2% identify as Democrats, but they don't support Biden. This is a stunningly unsuccessful impeachment inquiry so far for the purpose of what they're trying to achieve. I know there's only been one hearing, but it's not just the impeachment inquiry. What we're talking about here is the entire last last 6 months. It's been the build up, the hearing after hearing after hearing. It's not working, at least so far. And if the first impeachment is anything to go by, it's going to become less effective as time goes on.
It's funny you say that, though, because when you said we're going to do a polling section, I had a note of a poll that I saw.
Yeah.
It was an NPR Marist poll,
Yeah.
and they asked about the various allegations into Trump and Biden.
Yeah, yeah.
And they had a breakdown with Republicans, Democrats, Independents. And when they asked, they asked, do you think that Trump/Biden has done something illegal, something immoral, nothing at all? And they found the same, obviously the partisan splits kind of as you'd expect, but they found the same percentage of independents think Biden has done something illegal as Trump. And I had a note saying if that sticks, then the impeachment proceedings have done everything they need to before they've even started.
Well, what I'd say that's a different question.
It is.
Yeah, like like whether you've done something illegal at any point in time is different to whether you should be impeached.
Yeah.
It's they are not necessarily inconsistent with each other.
Yeah.
And I would also say that in terms of for the purposes of why you were going to bring that up, when you have a situation where if a person believes that both sides have done something illegal, which is, as you say, the reason they're doing this, to try and create that impression. If one side did something seemingly very illegal and the other side did something illegal, but it's like a slap on the wrist, then it's not a big deal, right? And the poll I just cited suggests to me that if it's consistent with what you just said and it matches up, which it may or may not, then there's a lot of people who think that Biden might have done something illegal that isn't a big deal, and so they might not have achieved what they want, even though that might be the best they're going to get. I should say that it might help them if people like Matt Gaetz weren't out there trashing the impeachment just publicly. I'll just read some quotes. I don't believe that we are endeavouring upon a legitimate impeachment of Joe Biden. They're trying to engage in a forever war of impeachment. And like many of our forever wars, it will drag on forever and end in a bloody draw. I just don't get the sense it's for the sake of impeachment. I think it's for the sake of having another bad thing to say about Joe Biden.
From Matt Gaetz.
Yeah, when he's right, I guess. He's a real wild card, Matt Gaetz. You never know with him. he swings big, whichever way he goes. Yeah, how about that?
Yeah, it surprises me.
Yeah. Here's an interesting. Do you have anything else to say about that before we go on? Here's an interesting one. This is what they call a rank choice primary poll, which is as if they were doing the primary with a ranked choice. So, just like we do with the Senate in Australia, they drop out, they do the poll, then they drop out the lowest person, and then they do the poll again. And they drop out the second lowest person, and so on, until they end up with 2 people. Right? This is from Fair Vote. Under this ranked choice system, Trump starts at 47.6%. That sounds hard to beat. DeSantis 12.7, Ramaswamy 12.6, Haley 7.7, and then the rest. After round 7, because they're at round 7, so they've dropped out 6 people at this stage. Trump is on 47.7%, 0.1% more. DeSantis is on 13.1%, Ramaswamy's on 12.9%, Haley's on 8.9%, and then there's a few others. In round 10, when Chris Christie drops out, Trump is at 48.7%. He's gone up 1.1% after round 10. Haley is on 20.3% at that point in time. Ramaswamy is on 15.8% and DeSantis is on 15.2%. So the takeaway is that all the people who are going to drop out are giving their votes directly to Haley at this point in time and to no one else. And, then what happens is Ramaswamy and DeSantis drop out because they're the 2 lowest, and a lot of their votes go to Trump. And so you end up with Trump getting 62.3% and Haley getting 37.7%. Haley got a lot closer than you might think, though. I found that really interesting. But just basically the key to Trump's support, according to that, is the people who are currently supporting DeSantis and Ramaswamy. Any thoughts on that?
No, it doesn't surprise me, particularly in the sense that they're trying to run in the same lane, and there might be a certain proportion of people who are kind of ready for something different but do like Trump and are enthusiastic about him. And Nikki Haley's obviously consolidating all of the Never Trump vote in that scenario, the sort of more classic conservatives who don't like Trump but have gone along for the ride to this point.
Well, my only takeaway is that Sanders has started to attack Trump pretty hard. Like, not like Chris Christie hard, but a lot harder than he used to. That could have an effect. If these people who are supporting DeSantis support DeSantis more than they support Trump, he might be able to change their minds. And like I don't mean in a way that's going to help him. I mean in a way that's going to help Haley.
She's not. What was Trump at though? 48%
It was
with the four of them in there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she would need to get literally every single DeSantis and Ramaswamy vote to go over the line.
Yeah, but I thought in the past, if you asked me, if I told you that this ranked choice primary poll was out there, and you asked me what it would end up with, I would have said, maybe 70-30, maybe 75-25, something like that.
Yeah.
And then that was 62-38, basically.
I still think it's going to end up there. I think that people who are saying they're open to a certain extent to DeSantis or Ramaswamy at the end of the day are going to go home to Trump. I don't think they're going to go to Nikki Haley, who's about as different as you can get in every respect.
Look, you're hard to argue with. I think you're right. While we're talking about Republican primary contenders, though, I've heard that you told me that you got your own juicy little poll to talk about.
It's not super juicy in the sense that I wouldn't say any of it is massively surprising, but it's still just an interesting little tidbit in the dynamics of the race where a conservative group recently spent $6 million on over 40 ads trialing different messages aimed at defeating Trump in the primary. So all the different ads are trying different attack points against Trump with the general aim of trying to bring his support down, not necessarily for a specific candidate. And they were trying attacks on Trump's COVID and vaccine stances, government spending, failure to build a wall, lack of support for pro-life positions, lack of anti-wokeness, openness to gun control, all of these things that are anathema to the Republican base in theory as issues. And they issued a candid assessment of how all of those myriad of campaign angles went. And they said, even when you show video to Republican primary voters with complete context of President Trump saying otherwise objectionable to primary voters, they find a way to rationalize and dismiss it. Every traditional post-production ad attacking President Trump either backfired or produced no impact on his ballot support and favorability. This includes ads that primarily feature video of him saying liberal or stupid comments from his own mouth. That's a quote from them. So basically, when they showed people video of Trump saying things that they disagreed with, it somehow made them like him even more. I don't know what you do with that. I mean, but it is weird because people often describe the dynamics in the Republican Party now as being like a cult. And I mean, I think it's more like that sort of cult of personality you get in a political context where you have a leader who has that kind of effect and rule over a whole population of people. But the weird thing about it, and obviously we've seen that lots of times before in history, but the weird thing about it is this is happening within the context of a country that's still a democracy. So it's this kind of political dynamic in one half of the country of this kind of unchallengeable leader where everyone just bends to the will of whatever he's saying on any given day, even if it contradicts what he says yesterday, and there's no dissent, and it's completely everyone in lockstep behind this person. But then there's also the other half of the country that's still just carrying on business as usual, like a kind of a normal political party in a normal political system. And I find that like quite a unique situation, and it just kind of seems to be, I mean, obviously we've been in this situation for a long time, but it just kind of seems to be further and further going down that rabbit hole of this kind of schism.
Well, yeah, I think you've hit on the issue. They're not in the same country. They might be on the same landmass, but they're not the same country. Like they've got different influences, different media, different culture, different everything.
But they're competing with each other to rule the same country. Like they're competing to rule each other.
Yes. Which is it's an unfortunate situation. It is really. I don't have much to add. It's very weird. Okay, let me throw to you some economics polling, which is, well, just on the economics in general. Well, I mean, we've talked a little about this before. About like inflation's pretty good right now. The PCE inflation is 3.5% for last year. You strip out the food and energy prices, which you do because they're more volatile. You get the core PCE. That's what the Federal Reserve cares about. That's 3.9%. But the core PCE went up a lot a few months back. So on a month-over-month basis, it's actually only up 0.1% in the last month, which is the slowest monthly increase since November 2020. So yeah, inflation's kind of, I mean, look, it might come back. It came back 2 months ago and then disappeared again. So yeah, it may come back, but it does look like they're getting close to have pretty much beaten it. But at the same time, 20% of adults, according to Gallup, say that economic conditions are excellent or good. 32% call them only fair, and 48% call them poor. The overall positive rating is down from August, even though inflation wasn't much during that period, and also the unemployment's down, and the GDP growth apparently this quarter is really good. The numbers are going to come out soon. The overall positive rating is down from 23% down to 20%. Poor rating up from 42% to 48%. That's the highest Gallup has seen in a year, that poor rating. 73% say economic conditions are getting worse. 24% say they're improving. They're not good numbers. There's Gallup as well. Those numbers, they've been about the same for a year. They're not quite as bad as they were when inflation was out of control, but they're not much better. It was about 80% saying things were getting worse back then. Now this next section is from Harris Polling, who, I need to put a disclaimer in there, is run by Mark Penn, not a well-respected man. But doesn't mean he's wrong, though. It doesn't mean he's wrong. And so I'm going to read the polls. I have given you the warning. You can take them with a grain of salt if you want. In August, the unemployment rate was 3.8%. That's close to a 50-year low. 51% thought that unemployment is nearing a 50-year high, rather than those who thought it was actually low, which was 49%. 60% of Republicans thought it was a 50-year high. 53% of independents thought that. 40% of Democrats thought that. These are all Harris. Next one. 82% of Republicans, 66% of independents believe the economy is worse than the media portrays. Also, 49% of Democrats say that. It's worse than the media portrays. GDP, as I said, was 2.1% last quarter. It's higher this quarter, apparently. But 59% believe the US economy is shrinking this year. 41% think it's growing. 72% of Republicans think it's shrinking. 63% of independents think it's shrinking. 44% of Democrats think it's shrinking. The S&P, the Stock & Poor's 500 stock market index is up 16% so far this year. That's not a huge amount, but it's up. 59% thought it was down for the year. 66% Republicans, 60% of independents, 52% of Democrats again. Wages, well, depending on who you ask, they are growing faster than inflation. 75% believe that wages are not keeping up with inflation. That's 84% of Republicans, 75% of independents, and 67% of Democrats. Now, in that case, as I said, depends how you measure this kind of stuff. I feel that the best measurement is compensation. That's total compensation per hour per capita. That's how I feel. That's everything per hour per capita. That's not back to pre-pandemic trend yet, if you account for inflation. I've got a graph right there. You can look at that right there. Look at that graph. Look at that graph. Look at that graph. This graph's from Brian Riedel. Here you go, Melina. You can look at it too. There we go. The red line is what Brian Riedel put in following the trend from before the pandemic. You can see where they are, that blue line. It's quite a gap there. Okay? There we go. Love a graph. Now, there is a partisan component here, of course, that according to Quinnipiac, for instance, 57% of Republicans say their personal economy is good. 5% say the national economy is good. So their partisan views ruin the polls. But I gave you the partisan split of all those points of view. there's a lot of negativity there amongst even Democrats with the economy. Do you have any thoughts about this before I go on?
Yeah, a few things. I think it is often the case in polling when you ask people about that. Like, I mean, you mentioned Republicans, but I think that is a thing in general. And I remember when we worked on the Australia Talks data, which was a big kind of survey of Australians for ABC, where there was a split between how people rate their personal well-being versus the national well-being. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was partly just a reflection of people's tendency to think that, you know, because the news is bad news and people tend to report the worst stuff in the news. So people often feel like, oh, everything's going to hell, but I'm doing okay. So that might be part of it. And then to kind of in one sense contradict exactly what I just said, I think to an extent as well, you say like the economic data is good, but that might not capture the fact that while it might be good on a national level, it is not good for everyone in the same way. And there is a big divide in terms of the economic realities for people in America. And just as one example of that, I was reading the other day, and I pulled this up because I knew we were going to talk about this. Some people looked at the data of the gap in life expectancy for college versus non-college educated Americans. And it was pretty shocking, the differences. And I have a graph on that if you want to show it.
Yeah. And by the way, for people who are interested, I'm going to be definitely doing more on this on Planet America. I'm obsessed with this too. Let's give them a sneak preview. Yeah.
Oh, we haven't discussed this ahead of time. So
yes. Here's the graph. Yep.
So basically they found, they looked at data from 1992 and now, because that's when this data started being collected, and they looked at life expectancy from the age of 25. So that's adult life expectancy. So that's taking out, you know,
child mortality.
Exactly, yeah. And so from age 25, those with a 4-year college degree, their life expectancy rose to 84 just before the pandemic, up from 79 years old in 1992. So 5 years up and 84 in total. During the pandemic, by 2021, that expectation had slipped by 1 year. Yep. For those without college degrees, life expectancy peaked in 2010 and has been falling since then. Adult life expectancy for this group started at 77 in 1992. So there was a 2.5-year gap between college and non-college educated at that time. By 2021, it was 75 years old, which is an 8.5-year gap. So the gap in life expectancy has grown by 6 years between 1992 and now, which is quite shocking.
It really is.
It's, you know, and if there is another graph in the same story that shows the gap in life expectancy between the US and other comparable rich countries in the world, and it's huge. And it is a total outlier. Like all the other developed countries are like crunched together in the same kind of section, same trajectory on the graph, and the US is just, I mean, you can put it up and show people. But for people who are listening, you can just see this decline in the US, and that is because of the non-college educated part of America, which is 2/3 of America. Yeah. So
in particular, I don't want to give away some of the punchlines coming up, but in particular, high school dropouts are a huge issue. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, does that matter for Biden? Because we're talking about this in the context of election and polling. I mean, obviously it should from a policy perspective, because it's a terrible thing for life expectancy to be going backwards at all, let alone so severely. From a kind of course political perspective, I'm not sure if it's hard to know. I mean, it could be secondary to the demographic elements that have kind of already sorted themselves into the Trump-Biden pools over the past 5 years, in the sense that college-educated voters have flocked to the Democrats, non-college educated voters have flocked to Republicans. There are more non-college educated voters, but they are less likely to vote proportionally than college-educated voters traditionally. And also, you know, there are racial components in how people vote. So, you know, a lot of non-college-educated people would be African-American, Hispanic. They are more likely to vote for Democrats. So it's hard to know how much these kinds of things will play in from an election perspective. But this is all just to say that, you know, you can kind of say GDP is going up and like inflation's going down and everyone's doing better off and unemployment is low. But, you know, at the same time, there are obviously these massive things happening in communities across America where people are suffering and dying, and, you know, without like trying to drill down on exactly what all the many reasons could be for that, you know, it's not surprising to me in a sense that people's perception of the economy doesn't necessarily match those sort of rosy figures.
Yeah, no, that sounds reasonable. I would also add to that I just waved away food and energy prices. Just but we don't count them. The Federal Reserve doesn't care about them. I'll tell you who cares about them. Punters care about them.
Yeah, I care about them.
Yeah. So the poor people and working class people and middle class people, they care about them, and they're going up.
Mm-hmm.
Also, inflation doesn't go backwards. If you've had a big jump, even when it ends up being like near zero, like it is right now, those prices aren't going backwards. They're still real high, and so it's not a surprise that people aren't loving them. There's a whole other kind of area which I did draw your attention to, which I'll now go into and to see if you have any thoughts about this. Which was, I just saw a study which I thought was really interesting from the Center for American Progress, where they polled a bunch of people about and they know the same kinds of trends that people trust Republicans on the economy by 6%, and they go, okay, why is that? And they noticed, first of all, that only 5% of federal Democratic politician press releases, Facebook posts, and tweets from 2022 had the word economy or economic in them. As 11% if you added in workers, wages, jobs, working families, or costs. And they drew a contrast to Sherrod Brown, who is known as being, Mr. Working Class, or is that 40% of his equivalent had those words. And they said, well, maybe Democrats aren't talking about this stuff as much as they could. And first of all, do you have any thoughts up to that point before we go?
Continue.
Keep going. Okay, all right. And so they asked a few other questions, like, for instance, how much of a priority is the economy to the parties? They asked these people. And 35% said that for 35% said that for Republicans it was their top priority. The 28% said it wasn't. Hang on, what have we got? Maybe I've done shorthand here, which isn't very useful. Let's leave that aside because I don't understand my own notes. 49% of self-identifying Democrats said that it was a top priority for Democrats, the economy. That's 49% of Democrats saying it's a top priority for Democrats. 63% of Republicans say it was a top priority for Republicans. Independents, 29% said Republicans, 10% said Democrats. Okay, so even leaving aside the bit of the poll which I can't understand, that's clearly showing that even the Democrats themselves said the economy wasn't their top priority, and independents shared that view. 58% said Democrats were too focused on social issues versus 30% who said Democrats gave the right amount of attention to strengthening the economy. So that's minus 28. Okay, 58 to 30. 36% said Republicans were too focused on social issues versus 47% who said Republicans have the right amount of attention to strengthening the economy. So that's 11 points the other way. So that's a 39-point gap between the views of the two parties. Independents said that Democrats they were minus 40 for social issues versus the economy. As in 40% more said that Democrats were too focused on social issues versus strengthening the economy. But they were plus 1 for Republicans. 1% more of independents said Republicans cared about strengthening the economy versus social issues. Senate voters were minus 34 for Democrats, plus 11 for Republicans. Any thoughts so far? Nope? Okay. Why is this? Well, there's a few reasons they postulated. They said, number one, like that Facebook thing before, Democrats might not be talking enough about the economy. Number two, Republicans might be defining Democrats as talking about social issues and wokeism. We know they're trying to. That might be being successful. Maybe Democrats talk about the economy in a social kind of way. When they're talking about the economy, they talk about fairness, for instance, and people interpret that as talking about social issues rather than the economy. The interesting thing as well is that 68% of them said that you grow the economy by growing the middle class rather than letting businesses thrive. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, hang on, that's Joe Biden's message. He's always saying that. So this whole thesis, I think, is almost disproven by Joe Biden, in that Joe Biden does talk about that shit all the time, growing the economy from the middle class, but just maybe the other Democrats don't follow his lead, and maybe that's their issue. Okay, now what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's hard to say whether they are not talking about the economy just because they don't care, or they are bad at messaging, or whether they have tried to focus group these things and find that people don't respond as well to them when they talk about the economy. I don't know. I am sure that it's occurred to them. So that's why I kind of, I know that this is like a PowerPoint that's been circulated among Democratic lawmakers, and everyone's like, it's so obvious, you're so stupid, why don't you talk about the economy more? And I kind of feel like chances are they have thought about this and there's probably some reason why they haven't. I don't know what it is. I obviously understand people say the economy is important to them. Why wouldn't you say the economy? But maybe the way they talk about it is more relevant to their voters. I don't know what they know.
Yeah, no, look, that's fair. It's fair to be humble about that kind of stuff, because you're right. Like, then, well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They're not idiots. Yeah, no, fair enough. Okay. I'm going to skip the stats nugget because we've talked enough about the economy, and it's about the economy. I'll save that for Dave. Just while we're going on polling here, there's the Biden old thing goes on forever. We've heard this to death. This is part of the issue, probably. It's probably a bit of a circle, probably a bit of a cycle of this, where we talk about it and people think of it more, and so then we talk about it more, and so on. Monmouth, 76% said Biden's too old to serve another term. 55% strongly agree. 48% say Trump is. 26% strongly agree. Now, my view is that a lot of this is because of incessant cherry picking of Biden being confused. When you watch his press conference, he's not confused all the time. Like, he seems to be. Sometimes he plays it up. Sometimes he acts confused in a kind of joking kind of way when he's wandering around the stage. Sometimes he does legitimately look really confused though when he's wandering around the stage. My main issue, as I've said many times, is that he sounds feeble. Like, I think that he doesn't, these days in the last year or so, he doesn't enunciate very clearly. He slurs his words. That's came from me. I'm the king of slurring your words. I think he's much better when he's on a one-on-one interview than when he's delivering a speech. When he's delivering a speech, he just doesn't have very much energy. He just seems weak. Whereas I think one-on-one, where it's like a quiet environment, I think he's actually pretty good. In fact, I think he's better at interviews than Trump is. And I think that if his people were smart, they'd wheel him out for a few more interviews. Like, I feel like he hides from interviews a bit, and he shouldn't. I think that's his strong point.
Well, I wonder if he'll do more when he's more formally on the campaign trail, because he's busy being president at the moment. I don't think that he's, like, I would imagine he's conserving his energy as not a young man until he's in, like, the, full swing of a campaign, because Trump isn't even officially the nominee yet. They still have to go through their whole nominating process. Yeah. So I suspect that he will do more at that time. And it doesn't necessarily serve him that much to be doing a lot of it now.
On that note, and this may well be the same thing that you just said, but Trump's not getting out there an awful lot either. Like, he can still deliver a speech. Like, he can still do his rally. Like, but he ain't doing rallies every day. Like, it's
and people are saying, I mean, this could be reported by us because I heard it from left-wing outlets, but people were sort of saying that the rallies are much lower energy now than they were in 2016. Like, that it is a distinctly different vibe, which would make sense because he's 8 years older. Yeah, well, not 8 years older, but
yeah. Although my personal view, as I've said a few times on this podcast, is that I think he's showing his age in a different way. I don't think he seems feeble.
Yeah,
I think he just seems wildly irrationally angry at times and paranoid, like old people do sometimes. He's got a bit of that, the overreacting, like Giuliani, same kind of thing. It's this wild kind of, what the hell's going through your head, mate? Kind of,
it's that get off my lawn energy.
Totally.
a certain kind of old man.
Yeah. And like I've said a number of times, that worries me more from a president. I prefer my president to take a nap than to make a wild decision.
Yeah, I mean, neither's great, but
No.
yes, in a binary choice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. But anyway, I've got an example here of one of Trump's kind of confused on stage moments, just to show you what I'm talking about. Like, he has plenty of them. This is an example.
As you know, crooked Joe Biden and the radical left thugs who have weaponized law enforcement to arrest their leading political opponent, and leading by a lot, including Obama. I'll tell you what, you take a look at Obama and take a look at some of the things that he's done. This is the same thing. The country was very divided. And we did with Obama. We won an election that everyone said couldn't be won. We beat Hillary Clinton. Now, you know, I used to call her Crooked Hillary.
So what's going on there? I mean, like he's got himself tangled up. He's got himself confused.
Wasn't he smooth the way he saved it, though?
Exactly. He's trying to act like he's not getting confused, and that just makes it so much funnier. They're actually my favourite Trump moments, when he gets himself just totally confused and he tries to bluff his way through. He's not fooling anyone.
I mean, he also does sound more, like, not fully feeble, but like the energy is lower. He sounds older.
Yeah. The energy
He
is
is
lower.
older.
Yeah, the energy is lower, but I still
not
maintain
as much as Biden.
Yeah, I still maintain Biden's got a feeble edge over him.
Yes.
But anyway, I think the main reason why this is an issue is because this is where we're getting to something which I know you want to talk about, is because we all know who the next in charge is, and that's Kamala Harris, right? Like, we don't know who Trump's vice president's going to be, but we know who Biden's is, and for whatever reason, people hate her. I have literally never seen a prominent political figure, like, I'm not talking like Mitch McConnell type figures, I'm talking about like president, vice presidents. Like, even Dick Cheney didn't poll as low as Kamala Harris does. Like, she polls really low. And I don't really understand why people hate her so much. I've got a toilet break here of Nancy Pelosi trying to not say that Kamala Harris should be the vice president. And then after that, I would like to know what your thoughts about this all are.
Is Vice President Kamala Harris the best running mate for this president?
He thinks so, and that's what matters. And by the way,
you think so?
She's very politically astute. I don't think people give her enough credit. She's, of course, values-based, consistent with the president's values and the rest. And people don't understand, she's politically astute. Why would she be vice president if she were not? But when she was running for attorney general in California, she had 6% in the polls. 6% in the polls. And she politically astutely made her case about why she would be good, did her politics, and became attorney general. So people shouldn't underestimate what Kamala Harris brings to the table.
But do you think she is the best running mate, though?
She's the vice president of the United States. So when people say to me, well, why isn't she doing this or that? I said, because she's the vice president. That's the job description. You don't do that much. You're a source of strength, inspiration, intellectual resource, and the rest. I think she's represented our country very well at home and abroad.
Okay, so that was weird. Why not lie, Nancy? Like if you don't have a lie detector on you, just say, yeah, I think she should be vice president. She's wonderful. Yeah, go. And then end the interview. It's really strange. But...
Yes. I find this so strange as well. I feel like there's been like a lot of hand-wringing about Biden running for re-election in general, with this increasing recognition that he's the only option. And I think in that context, this like frenzied attention has then turned to Kamala Harris, and the hand-wringing has been then redistributed to her, and this kind of feeling of, okay, Biden's not a great candidate. Could we get a better VP candidate? This seems to be the energy behind this like wave of criticism that was in the press around the time of this Pelosi clip, and calls to replace her on the ticket. And I mean, Nancy Pelosi, also Jamie Raskin as well, like really pointedly refusing to endorse her. And like, obviously the intention on her is increased because of Biden's age. I think that's one answer to why she gets more heat than, say, Dick Cheney, because no one thought that George Bush was likely to die in office. And there's actually polling showing a very high number of people think that Trump and Biden may not finish out their next term. So I understand why there's attention on her. There's a non-zero chance that she is becoming president if he gets reelected. But I find the hand-wringing about Kamala Harris bafflingly. Okay, she's not a great politician. I think we can agree on that. There's a reason that she didn't make it to Iowa when she ran for president. But I find the criticism of her like really overblown. I mean, my question with the hand-wringing is it a political, is the motivation behind it political or non-political? And what I mean by that is when McCain picked Palin as his running mate, there was concern among serious Republicans because Palin was clearly unsuitable to be president, and serious people who were backing McCain at that time when the Republican Party was more of a normal party were genuinely concerned about the process because McCain was also not young, had also had health scares in the past, and there was genuine concern behind the scenes about the idea of Palin becoming president. There were people on his team who didn't end up voting for him because they were so worried about that. I suspect that's not Democrats' issue with Kamala Harris. Are they seeing her up close and think she's would be dangerous to be president? I think it's unlikely. It's hard to imagine they would think she's more dangerous than Trump. So in terms of their priorities, I don't know why that would be making them act this way. Or is it political in the sense of, are they worried about Biden being reelected? Do they think she's a political liability? In which case they should honestly calm down, because the bigger liability is like encouraging this narrative that she would be terrible as president, that she shouldn't be the vice president, and making people think, well, if I vote for Biden, I might end up with her. And all the signals I'm getting is that she is terrible. And yeah, I mean, I think in terms of her as a politician, people talk a lot about her favorability being bad, but I have a graph, you can put it up,
sure.
that shows Harris's approval, and it basically tracks exactly with Biden's over the course of his term. It's a few points lower than him every step of the way. I don't think that's that surprising that she would be less popular than the president who beat her in the primary. By definition, you would expect him to be more, it would be bad if he was less popular. And basically, their polling started above water and has gradually gone below water for both of them. Conservatives really hate her, which I also think is kind of overblown. I mean, they're not going to vote for Biden anyway. And I think some of their hatred is like a little bit irrational or partisan. I mean, one example that got a lot of traction, there was an interview recently, you can put it on if you want to later, but where she was interviewed in the news and talking about their policy on abortion, and the interviewer kept pushing her to nominate the week at which she would cut off access. And she kept saying over and over again, we just want to get back to Roe. Like, we just want to reinstate Roe. That's all we want to do. And she just kept giving that answer over and over again. And in conservative press, it was characterized as her being absolutely moronic and like, look at this word salad. She can't answer a question. Like, she's like, her brain is wrong. Like, just characterized like she, was a total moron. And I mean, to me, I watched it and I thought, she's a politician giving a politician answer. She doesn't want to nominate Weeks because then as soon as you're pinned down, that gives people an attack line.
Totally.
Like, yes, it was inane in the way that politicians often are inane when they don't want to answer a specific question with a specific answer. She could have been more deft in the way she gave her inane answer or sold it more charismatically. But like politically, it wasn't stupid to say, I mean, that's like a clear offer to voters. We're just going back to the status quo. There's this big change. You don't like the big change. We'll go back to what it was before. That makes perfect sense to me as a political answer. I don't think that there's anything that outlandishly wrong or surprising about it. And I just think the overreaction was really disproportionate to the quality of the clip. And, I just think like Democrats and independents are not going to vote for Trump over Biden unless they somehow get the idea that Harris is so dangerous that she's more of danger than Trump. And like, it's not an idea. I mean, to me, that's absurd. I don't think that's factually true that Harris would be more dangerous than Trump. But Democrats aren't doing anything to dispel that feeling, which is crazy strategically. So I just don't understand what they're doing. And like my hot take on Kamala Harris is she's not that bad.
Yeah.
I don't think she's great, but she's fine.
Yeah, I was going to say.
She seems stable.
She does seem stable.
That's something in this day and age.
Yeah, it is. It is. I was going to say with the word salad thing, that like that's what Republicans definitely focus on, the word salad. And look, there are some beauties. Like I've got a couple examples here. I'll just play one.
We also recognize just as it has been in the United States for Jamaica, one of the issues that has been presented as an issue that is economic in the way of its impact has been the pandemic. So to that end, we are announcing today also that we will assist Jamaica in COVID recovery by assisting in terms of the recovery efforts in Jamaica that have been essential to, I believe, what is necessary to strengthen not only the issue of public health, but also the economy.
You just go, that's not great. Yeah. You're like, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. She's really not good on her feet. She talks a lot of crap, right? But I mean, it's one thing to say that she's not a very good speaker, and it's another thing to say, as you say, that she's unstable or she's horrible or that she's going to destroy the country or whatever. She's probably a campaign liability as far as, getting out there and invigorating the populace goes. Right? Oh, I should play one more. Here's another example.
The governor and we were all doing a tour of the library here and talking about the significance of the passage of time, right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs. And there is such great significance to the passage of time when we think about a day in the life of our children.
That's not going to inspire anyone, but is she going to drive Democrats away? No, she's not going to drive Democrats away because they're not voting for her anyway. They're voting for Biden if they vote, and they're in particular they're voting against Trump. That's what they're like. They're not going to vote for Trump instead of her. Are they going to stay home because of her? I doubt it. Are there? So, is it if she was president, would it be a disaster? I mean, I kind of feel sorry for her in a way because I have no idea what she'd be like as president because all she's been given has been impossible tasks. Like the two major tasks that Biden gave her was to sort out illegal immigration and gun violence. Like, give that to anyone. They're not going to look good. Now, I don't think she's done a great job on either score. But yeah, I feel like I don't know what this phenomenon of hatred for Kamala Harris is. Sometimes I feel like the right-wing media has more power than people think. Like that, it's like there are certain times when it has no power at all. There are certain times when I think it really cuts through. And I think this might be one of those examples. I also think Hillary was one of those examples as well. I haven't said anything about sexism or racism or any of those things, which may be involved, but I'm not going there because I think that she's objectively not good. But I also just think that just the sheer contempt for someone who is more mockable, I think, rather than horrible. People compare it to Veep, and I think that's an apt comparison. But people don't hate Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I find it mysterious, and I don't have an answer.
And also, a sort of a core component of Veep was the fact that vice presidents are powerless and are in this weird, awkward job where they have to be in front of the media, but they have no power, no control. It's not their policies, and they have to speak to that. And it's not, I think, a platform really for anyone to shine. Yeah. But yeah, and also the idea, I think Democrats have this idea of, if we got rid of her and parachuted in someone else, it would be this great campaign asset. And I agree with you that I think that she's a liability in the sense that, she's not a great politician, and people obviously are conscious of the fact that Biden, could conceivably not live through a full second term. He is very old. Things can happen quickly when you're old. And so people are obviously going to look more closely at his vice president than, they might when it was Biden as Obama's vice president, and they might not like what they see, but it's not a sure thing that people would be happier to see Gavin Newsom when they looked, or Gretchen Whitmer. Like, those people are also untested. Kamala Harris seemed like a great prospect. I remember in 2020, you thought she would be the nominee.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did before I saw her do anything.
Exactly.
Right.
And I mean, she was a politician. She had, she was a senator, so it's not like she'd done nothing. But there is a difference when you're tested on the national stage in that context. So. The idea that there's an obvious choice that would do better. And also, I just think, even if there was, the signal you send by changing course at this point in the game is just so terrible that it's like you are not going to benefit, even to the extent that she's a liability. Changing would be a bigger liability. And so, again, I just come back to, as you were saying at the beginning as well, when Nancy Pelosi is asked, is she the best person? Why would you not just say yes?
Yeah.
I don't understand why they're kneecapping themselves in this way by signaling, oh, she's pretty bad. Okay. So do you not want people to vote for you? What?
Yeah, it's very strange.
I don't understand it at all.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up what you just did a second ago, because I never finished my point when it was related to that, which was saying that, I don't think she's going to drive Democrat voters away. I don't think, she's not going to win Republican voters over, but she wasn't going to anyway. As for independents, I think they're going to vote for either they hate Trump or they don't. I said, like, this is about Trump, this election, right? Like it's not about Kamala Harris. So she makes no difference to the election. But if you got rid of her at this point in time, you would start a Democratic civil war. And then there would be a real danger that some Democrats would stay home. And not because they're massive Kamala Harris fans, but just we all know the symbolism. Like, I don't need to go into it. It's kind of obvious. Right? Like you just go, so the first black woman who isn't some star just gets nobbled immediately. Biden isn't doing too well. Why is he there? Etc. And you can just see it. You can see a mile off. If they got rid of her, they would potentially lose Democrat votes. And if they did, that's the end of the election. They just can't afford to take that risk. So they got to dance with the ones that brung them. That's where we're at. Anyway, I want to just, we got a whole bunch of other topics which we're not going to get to because we're going to run out of time. So let me just finish off vice presidential thoughts with one other thing. And because I know you got a few thoughts about where I'm going here as well. And then we'll just wrap it up, okay?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not going to spin this out. I was going to spin this out a bit, but I'll make this quite quick. Tim Scott, a few weeks back, there was a Washington Post article about a Republican operative who was speculating Tim Scott might be making up his girlfriend. Tim Scott's a bachelor. For those who don't know, he's 57. He's been single his whole life. He told Dana Bash he was once engaged, but the reporter in this piece said that his friend, Tim Scott's friend since his childhood, had never heard of this engagement that he supposedly had. The reporter asked Scott about his current girlfriend. Scott said that he was set up with this lady from church. They started talking head off with discussions about God, using a phone app to do a Bible study together, etc. It all sounds a little bit weird.
Does she live in Canada?
Well, there's a bit of that. There's certainly a vibe of that. No one can verify her existence, apart from one campaign staffer who swears that she went to the zoo with his girlfriend once. That's it. So she's the only person that the reporter could find who has seen this supposed girlfriend, okay? The reporter was aware of what was going on. The reporter was saying, I was put onto this by a Republican operative who supports a different candidate. They quote, it seemed like a not terribly original attempt to stir up gossip amongst conservative voters about how an unmarried Republican candidate might be weird about women or to raise questions about his sexuality within the party's stubbornly homophobic factions. So the reporter was onto it. Yes, it does seem like that to me as well. Oh, how about that?
Oh, no.
Oh, wow. We've got no light.
Spooky.
Hang on. I'm just going to turn the light on properly. There we go. It's never a great sign when they turn the lights off on That's like the Oscars player. Anyway. Okay, so now I wasn't going to bring that up, that Tim Scott story. I vetoed it from Planet America because John wanted to bring it up and I said, that's crap. To me, it seemed irrelevant and stupid. Who cares? I've changed my mind. I'll tell you why. Because then the week after that, we learned all about Kristi Noem's extramarital affair in the Daily Mail. Kristi Noem supposedly had an affair with Corey Lewandowski. He's Trump's one-time campaign manager, all-purpose thug. He's a kind of a bit more Sopranos than DC, but he was sacked in 2016 after he manhandled a conservative journo. He's still around. Noem supposedly been having an affair with him since 2019. They're not commenting on the allegations. Apparently they've been spotted in public a lot, canoodling, not being subtle. Both are married. He's also apparently had an affair with Hope Hicks as well, and he's being accused by another conservative of sexual assault after smacking her ass very hard. He's a great bloke, this guy. Anyway, Noem, according to the Daily Mail, cuffed ties with him after allegations he sexually harassed another woman a couple of weekends back. Now, I wouldn't normally cover that either. There's something they have in common, and those two stories are so close together. And what they have in common is that they're two of the favourites to be Trump's vice presidential choice. And I thought, isn't that interesting that these two stories have been leaked by someone or other right around the time that Trump becomes the raging favourite to be the candidate, and people are talking about who his vice presidential choice might be. It's possible that the rat fucking has begun, and possibly by someone else who wants to be VP, someone who's been sucking up to Trump almost religiously of late, someone who has zero ethics whatsoever, seemingly, someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who apparently had dinner with Trump just before the impeachment inquiry where they strategized. She says she briefed him. She says she told Trump she wants the impeachment inquiry to be, quote, long and excruciatingly painful for Joe Biden. Now, I get turnabout is fair play. I get that. This impeachment may turn out to be, more than fair enough. Sure, solid piece of work, whatever. But do you ever remember Democrats saying that about Trump? That they want the trial to be as long and as excruciatingly painful for him as possible? Like that they want to torture him with impeachments or trials. It's just so bloodthirsty. So how deranged would you need to be? Anyway, let's leave that aside. I wonder whether Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to nobble her opponents, because she clearly is running for vice president. And I know you've got some thoughts about Marjorie Taylor Greene being vice president.
Yes. Look, your theory sounds very plausible to me. Yeah. I think you may well be right. But I also know you have floated a couple times the idea of him picking Marjorie Taylor Greene or Carrie Lake for vice president. And look, I tend to try and not make predictions and do the pundit thing, and I may come to regret this because I'm really going to go hard. But I think there is zero chance he will pick Marjorie Taylor Greene or Carrie Lake for vice president. I just could not feel more strongly that he would, for a few reasons. First of all, I think he would never pick someone who's the slightest risk to steal the spotlight from him. Yep. First and foremost, he is someone who does not want someone who's going to be getting lots of attention. He wants to be the star of the show always. And those two also love being the star of the show. Oh, the lights are back. And they're saying, go on! And so I think for that reason alone, he would never pick either of them. But also, it doesn't make any strategic sense. He does not need help appealing to MAGA voters. MAGA voters love Trump. They are showing up for Trump. Those two do not add anything to the ticket for him at all. He needs help keeping the normal Republicans on side. They're the ones that might not vote for him that he needs to get in his tank. And the lights are going again. I do think he is still lucid enough to make some smart strategic decisions, or someone in his circle is. And I'll give as an example of that, that earlier in the year, he or his people went about seeking endorsements from Florida congressmen and got the jump on DeSantis. And so by the time DeSantis flew to Washington to try and get his fellow Floridians to endorse him for president, he found they had all already been buttered up by Trump and Trump's people and had all already decided to go for Trump. And that was a big early embarrassment and a big early sign that DeSantis' campaign was not going to go the way DeSantis thought it was going to go. And that was smart. And that just made strategic sense, the way they did that. So they're not completely off the rails. They do think in smart, strategic ways a lot of the time. And so I think, whether it's Tim Scott or someone else, he's going to pick another normie Republican. It's the next Mike Pence. It's obviously not going to be Mike Pence again, but it's going to be someone like Mike Pence who fulfills that same function. a normal conservative who is a Christian evangelical, most likely, that is respected amongst the establishment Republican class. I don't think it will be a Nikki Haley. I think she is too divisive still. I think it very well could be a Tim Scott, who is well-liked, very quick to put up his hand in the debates when asked if he would support Trump even if he was convicted, has never pissed off Trump and is well-liked among the Republican establishment. It might not in the sense that I do think Trump would probably still not be what. I think Trump kind of is a bit back and forth in terms of whether he wants to abide by his racist instincts or his instincts to try and peel off a bit of the black male voter. So whoever wins out on the day. But if not Tim Scott, I think it's going to be someone like that. And I think the one other consideration that will be front of mind for him is he is going to want to pick someone that he thinks will back him when he wants to do things of questionable legality in office. So someone who he thinks will be acquiescent.
Giuliani.
No, I think it will be some milquetoast Republican who he feels he can control and who he feels will do his bidding, but presents as a normie Republican, at least at this stage in the process. I don't know for sure who that'll be, but it will be someone who fits that profile,
Well, maybe,
I would bet.
if he wants a woman, it could be Tim Scott's girlfriend.
I don't think he wants a woman.
Okay, well, I'm really glad that we squeezed that in because that's good stuff, and I'm definitely going to throw that at Dave the next time that he brings up Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Or throw it in my face if I turn out to be totally wrong.
Don't worry, I will. Okay, so that's enough. I remember you were telling me the other day that you found it strange and disorienting when I said we've run out of topics. Well, let me tell you, we haven't run out of topics today. There's plenty, which I'm going to fold over again. So there's a social media Supreme Court case, which I've been meaning to talk about for the last 10 podcasts. I'm gonna work it in. They're gonna finish going through this case by the time we get to it. Anyway, to take us out, I'm not just going to play the usual outro. I've got some music for you all. This is a full entertainment experience, Melina, today. Lara Trump has started to sing. I don't know if you realise that. She's got a single out. She's got a remake. She's done a remake of I Won't Back Down by Tom Petty. Now, the treat for you guys is I could play you her actual song, but I won't do that. Because I got something better. She says she's been censored. She says the quote is, "They wouldn't put my song on the radio because it was too political, and I think it's time we as conservatives start fighting back." I agree, and I appreciate it. And she's going to start fighting back on this podcast right now. We have her singing live to Erin Molan on Sky News. I'm so excited by this. So to take us out, we got Lara Trump singing I Won't Back Down. Enjoy. Thank you very much, Melina.
Thank you.
Next podcast with you, Hunter Biden.
Yes.
It's coming. I don't know when it's going to be, but it's coming. And for you guys, enjoy Lara Trump. Stay peppy.
Back down. No, I won't back down. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. And there's more to come.
That was amazing.